Okay, this is a quick reflection on our qualitative methodology online residential school. Now, I loved it, but something went wrong. And I'm not talking about my technical skills as a Zoom host, though that clearly went wrong for a few times. But what actually went wrong was something that goes wrong every year. Why did it go wrong? And why does it keep going wrong? Well, I'm about to tell you. Now, I've put my videos of the main discussions that happened in the large room of our online residential up on our Moodle site for those of you who are enrolled on the unit. And if you aren't enrolled on the unit, sorry, but you can't access those videos because you haven't paid your fees. But I would like to comment on something that happened at the residential, and I'm sticking this audio file up on YouTube because it might interest more than just those of us who were at the residential. Now, during the residential, there were quite a number of times when we used the term bias, and we talked about bias as something that had to be removed from the way we conducted our individual interviews. Now, this was a strong sign that we were still a bit stuck in the quantitative paradigm. In qualitative research, bias is actually a good thing, but we call it subjectivity. Now, many of us have learned through our psychology training and research methods that subjectivity is bad. And this is something we also learn generally in our cultural upbringing in the West, that the sign of someone being professional is someone who is able to maintain their sense of objectivity. And that comes from very old ideas that are attached to the age of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. But let's not get into all of that just now. Let's try and keep this one short if we can. So generally the point I want to make is that in psychology we devalue subjectivity because of the experimental paradigm we largely work in, which promotes objectivity over subjectivity. And in Western culture, more generally, we view objectivity as the focus of science and subjectivity as the focus of art and literature. And in Western culture, science is generally privileged over the arts. And you can see that in the differential levels of funding that each attracts. There's a lot more money goes into science than goes into art. But here's the thing. Subjectivity is what helps us make sense of the world. If we remove subjectivity, we wouldn't be able to make sense of anything. Our art and our literature would have no soul, but also our science would make no sense. So think of it this way. Subjectivity is everything we have experienced in life and what we have learnt from those experiences. The ways we've learnt to think and feel and act. Everything we've learnt from life. And I mean everything. And everything includes language. We learn to speak. We weren't born speaking the language that we speak. We were taught language. So if we seek to entirely remove our subjectivity, we would remove language. And that would mean that in your qualitative research interview, you wouldn't be able to understand a bloody thing your interviewee is saying. And it would also mean that your questions would just be a series of grunts, just grunting away through the interview. It's nonsense. So why do we pursue this nonsense? Why do we pursue this nonsense of trying to remove all of our subjectivity when we do research? I tell you how we do it. We reduce the notion of subjectivity to the notion of bias and then turn bias into a pejorative term so everyone can agree that it's a bad thing and we should get rid of it. Now, it's not just language that is part of subjectivity. It's also our systems of shared meaning. It's our culture. Our culture sets out the ways we can make sense of and live reasonably peacefully with others around us. It's the thing that enables us to work together, to live together. It's the thing we share and have in common. The thing that binds us to one another. So subjectivity is not something we should remove. It's not something we need to control. It's something we need to acknowledge, and we acknowledge it by reflecting on it and writing about it alongside our presentation of our data and our analysis from our research, so that we make that subjectivity transparent and help whoever uses our research to understand why we interpreted our research findings in the way we did. At the very least, We need to understand how our culture impacts how we make sense of things, and to acknowledge that whilst we share our culture with others, we don't share that culture with everyone, and that some people from a different cultural background might make sense of things in a very different way to the way that we make sense of things. And that is why subjectivity is important, and calling it bias and arguing that we should reduce it or remove it is not what we should be doing at all. You know, it's not what we should be doing, and certainly not something we should be doing in qualitative methods. We need to keep hold of our subjectivity and reflect on it and report on it. Okay, that's my rant over. I hope I gave you something to think about. Okay, till next time. Ta-da.